Alright, hey there. Welcome back. New setup back down here in the basement of Ground Zero Salem with your host, Pat. So for the people that have commented on my last couple of videos, thank you very much. If you missed it, there's a few videos that I shot down in Florida. My mother passed away, so I decided one of the best ways for me to eulogize her would be to talk about the music that we shared and that she raised me on. I will leave a link for that if you wanna check that out. A lot of people reached out, which was incredibly nice. So deep, sincere thanks to all of you who commented and issued your condolences. But I'm back in the basement of my humble domicile. Got back around Thursday. Flight sucked. Missed my connecting flight. Tropical storms. Whole thing blew. But I'm home, so that's good. And I have stacks and stacks and stacks of music to talk about. Despite the fact that I haven't felt particularly inspired to get on a webcam and talk about music in a bit, for obvious reasons, I'm still buying and consuming and listening just as much as always. Actually, the buying part has slowed down the past like 3 or 4 weeks. There's just not a lot coming out that I want, and a lot of my itchiness to fill certain types of holes, God, that sounds dirty, is kind of dissipated a bit. You can see behind me here, I went on a big binge of buying these Captain Oi box sets and a few other labels of kind of discographies of bands, and I think I'm going to do a fun little quick update just showing those off probably next. But right now I have CDs, tons of vinyl to talk about, tons of cassettes to talk about. But I'm going to do a big old stack of like 40 CDs. We're going to have one of those epic long updates where I just babble at you, sometimes inaccurately, about bands that I like. So that's exciting. If it looks like I don't know where to look, it's because I have sort of a new setup. Right now I'm trying to look at the camera. I'm using a program called OBS that you're probably familiar with if you're into streaming or you know anything about that sort of thing. It's a free program. I'm recording on my computer again because it's connected to a microphone that sounds a lot better than my phone microphone, which was starting to have some sibilance issues. That's the thing about filming with phones. Like, I've noticed the quality is better than webcams, but because you beat the shit out of your phone, it goes with you everywhere. You tend to kind of like drop it sometimes, and I think there's something going on with my microphone. I tried cleaning out and stuff, but there's that cracking sibilance thing. A few people mentioned it, so I am going to try to use this. I initially bought a webcam that turned out to be not great. Here it is. There it is. Looks cool. It's got a flip-up thing. Quality is good. The quality's decent. However, it doesn't accept like a mic. You can't connect a mic to it anywhere. And I tried using it as a webcam with this OBS program, and it will not go into widescreen format, so I'm using my trusty cell phone, and it seems to look pretty good. I mean, we got like some pretty good like autofocus going on there. So without further ado, enjoy your upgrade here if you're a fan. My upgrade for you, my loyal watchers. So this is all CDs. This is shit that a lot of these came from Residency Records here in Salem. A lot of them were Discogs purchases, random distros. I mean, this is going back like almost 4 months, I think. Big old stack. So let's jump right in now that I've been babbling, keeping house for the first couple of minutes here. From Residency, Hidden World by Fucked Up. No, it's not working. Oh, there we go. There we go. Hidden World by Fucked Up. Their first proper full length. Fucked Up, I believe, is still around. When this came out, I was completely in love with this band. Canadian band that mixed some of the best elements of early 80s hardcore and punk, reminding me kind of a head-on collision of like Negative Approach, Blitz, and Black Flag. A lot of mid-paced stompy stuff, real gravelly vocals. They did a series of singles that are compiled on a CD. Can't remember. I think it's Early Works. It's got a name like that. There's an early recordings compilation that's all their singles that you should definitely get if you like anything like that. Then they started to get a little weird with this. This has some longer songs, although they're all pretty rockin', still pretty hardcore, but they kind of get pretty ambitious with like how long the songs are and the song structures somewhat on this, and it's where it lost a lot of people. At the time, it lost me too. I had a double LP of it, and I liked about the first half of it, and then I got bored. Going back on this, being a much more mature hardcore kid, or whatever I am, music listener, music appreciator, this record's fucking great. I can listen to it all the way through. Might have something to do with the fact that, like, shortly after getting into this and kind of dismissing it, I started listening to, like, Flower Traveling Band, and then eventually, you know, some metal bands that had more expansive song structures. So this just came along at a point where all I wanted were like 3-minute long hardcore songs, you know, or metal songs. Then every intellectual's darling band, Melvin's Ozma and Gluey Porch Treatments, a 2-on-1 of like 2 of their earlier records. Came out on Boner Records out of Berkeley. Yeah, I mean, I get it. Why people like this record so much, Ozma at least. It's got some very dense, very heavy fucking riffs, and bite-sized little portions. You know, all the songs are minute, 2 minutes long. I still will never really be super into this band, largely due to the fact that they just have this cult of personality and like a certain type of fanboy. It's really, I don't know, something about it is just a turn off. I mean, obviously Buzz's comments that were from 2 years ago or 3 years ago that were for some reason outed like earlier this year, the interview with Gavin McGinnis doesn't help, but you know, whatever. I mean, the music alone is what I'm paying attention to here. Yeah, I don't know. Now I understand what Ben goes through with the autofocus, because it's like, anyways, yeah, it's fine. You know, it's like kind of outsider art, outside the box, heavy stoner Sabbathy kind of stuff when nobody else was doing it, and it's its own thing for sure. So I get the respect, but whatever, it's fine. This next one is a Japanese band that I always fuck up the name, Shinda Saibo no Katamari, Ostriched Existence, sent to me by Ed, Midwestern Abyss, who got me into this band not that long ago, almost a year ago now, maybe more like 8-9 months. I was like super neck deep in all this kind of early brutal DM kind of slam sort of stuff, and he recommended their first album to me, and this is much along the same lines. You know, it certainly would appeal to anybody who's into that like 90s brutal death metal before it got too like clicky and clinical sounding, like recording wise. Super punchy, super like on the money, nice vibrant live kind of sounding recording quality. Fucking, it's got the slams where it counts, and I mean, Ostriched Existence, it's great. Like the last album had like tentacled kind of Lovecraftian monsters bowling. These guys also look really cool, I should point out. Look at those dudes. I would hang out with them. Have a couple of Pabstises. Or perhaps maybe a nice Stella Artois or something. Then Ken, over at Ken's Death Metal Crypt, sent me this CD compiling all the Unnatural stuff up to date, his band. He was kind enough to actually send me all of these EPs separately, but this is a nice compilation, kind of bringing everything together. Great Midwestern death metal. Super fucking brutal. It definitely has a lot of like almost death doomy elements to it, but also not, you know, also has plenty of up-tempo kind of shit as well. Stuff that, I mean, these guys were, I don't know when they started, but the first release is from 2015. It's a lot of that, like, you know, very early Mortician, very early Incantation, Gutted, like that kind of stuff. Like, this easily could have found a home on Maggot Stomp and been right there with everything else. But these guys have been into this type of stuff, I think, longer than half the roster of that label has been alive. So, you know, but if you happen to like that particular label and, you know, that sort of more simplistic, dragging kind of death metal stuff, definitely check out Unnatural. and this is Afflicted Path to Cursed Putrefaction on Famine Records. Available now. Then, there's been a lot of talk in my circle, my circle of tyrants about Morgoth lately. It's just been one of those old bands that's kind of come up in conversation for whatever reason. I think Marty and Matt talked about Feel Sorry for the Fanatic. I used to have this. You know, this was like I picked it up used, I think, at the Newbury Comics I worked at for like $3, and I could have sworn I didn't flip it. I looked through my my whole library here, and it was no longer. So I shelled out a little bit of money, not a lot, under $20, but it's a double CD. It came sealed, which is nice. And if you don't know, 90s German death metal, some of the best. If you like Chuck Schuldener's voice, if you like Martin Van Drunen's voice, Mark Grew from Morgoth has a very similar kind of like hoarse bellow. You know, it's not quite there yet as far as the gutturalness, like where death metal would go in the 90s. And the music's nice and speedy and shreddy and kind of 1 foot rooted in thrash still. You know, detuned and everything. The Pits of Autumno demo that's included on CD2 here is definitely like that great brutal thrash or death thrash, like crossing over. You can hear like a pretty prominent like Teutonic sort of influence, I'd say. And then of course you have the tracks from Feel Sorry for the Fanatic and Odium, which they're going off in a different direction. Odium's a lot more stompy, in a weird way, probably unintentionally. It kind of reminds me of like some kind of metallic tough guy hardcore-ish kind of stuff at certain moments. And Feel Sorry for the Fanatic, which is like almost like Killing Joke worship, sort of industrial influenced metal, which a lot of people, it tanked with a lot of people when it came out, but I think it's actually quite good. I think it's great. I have the Billy Bragg Back to Basics CD. This compiles like all of his earliest stuff that was just sort of singer-songwriter kind of shit. Very pretty, very British, very like socialist union themed with a lot of the lyrics. It's either that or love songs. Trying to remember, I feel like this compiles a couple of albums, but I can't remember what they are. So I'll probably leave it in an annotation at the bottom right now. Alright, Sentenced to Muck. This is one that Marty has been talking about or talked about recently. The panned albums or controversial albums that you really like topic. And yeah, like I have the two preceding this, Shadows from the Past and North from Here. And I always kind of avoided this like the plague because I really hated the cover art. And I know that they went in kind of a weird direction, but I didn't know what these Finnish dudes sounded like on this record. And this is great. This sounds a lot like a combination of sort of melody-driven death metal. I wouldn't say straight up at the gates, but like, you know, death metal with some melody combined with death rock. Like specifically like Sisters, Fields of the Nephilim kind of stuff. And it's a fucking great, tasty combination. I highly recommend it if you know, like the kind of more baritone throated sort of death rock stuff. Not really like The Cure or Alien Sex Fiend or something like that, but all the Eldritch McCoy kind of that kind of Cleopatra Records, that kind of death rock combined with death metal, Scandinavian kind of melodic death metal stuff. Very fucking cool. Makes me want to throw on a duster, go on a quest. Doom Reviled. This was originally called Fuck Peaceville. It's this UK crust band that started in the mid to late 80s. Still going strong. Saw them once when I was over there. They were great. You know, kind of D-beat driven. I wouldn't say pure D-beat. You know, kind of like the original wave of crusty hardcore, along with Extreme Noise Terror and all that stuff. Important, influential band. You know, the first time I ever heard of them was because the guys in Sepultura were wearing their shirts and stuff. Great shit. You know, if you like grind or really like simplistic death metal, give them a shot. The reason they recorded this was all their songs up to a certain point. They were on Peaceville. Hammy over at Peaceville decided he was going to make the move to merge his label with Music for Nation, and Doom was like, yo, that's not punk. Fuck you. I don't know. I don't remember the whole story. I read the Hammy book. I'm not sure if it was that he'd agreed not to, or they just weren't happy with that, or whatever. But they recorded this as kind of a middle finger to him, and I think it came out on Profane Existence in the States, and I think Sculled in Germany. So, and the recording quality and the punchiness, things are played a little bit faster and tighter. So it's like almost like it kind of reminds me of this Extreme Noise Terror Retribution record, where they basically cleaned up the recording and played stuff a lot tighter and faster. That doesn't always work. Hello, Suicidal Tendencies. But when it does, I mean, especially with these crusty bands that, I like the raw recordings that they have, but when they play stuff a little bit more together, it sounds pretty fucking rad too. All right. This is a beautiful, impressive discography. Complete Paranoid discography, 2012 to 2017. Swedish band doing sort of like a noisy, paying a lot of odes to Swedish Mongol kind of stuff, but also kind of Japanese, owing a lot to Kuro and Gizm and stuff like that. Pretty much anything from those two countries that's super blown out, super feedback drenched, but also holding it together with some really good blazing leads and metallic kind of influences. I've been hearing more of this lately, where the bands have a ton of feedback and just bleeding over noise, but there's still like this lovely undercurrent of songwriting underneath it. I think Warthog also does it really well. So yeah, fucking cool band. I have a split with Absolute from Canada. That's great. That's included on this. I think they have like a bunch of new stuff coming out as well. Definitely a band to watch. And then I got Concrete Socks Suicide. This is the last album that Concrete Socks did. Came a little OBI there. Good band. Not my favorite out of all the UK HC bands. It's probably like Ripcord or something like that. Heresy on a good day. I like Concrete Socks. They're definitely like the most out of all those like Network of Friends kind of bands. Like they were the most like thrash metal. They had like a certain like really dirty early Metallica Exodus, almost like a Bay Area kind of thing, but like falling apart. Maybe another good pointer would be like early Accused, that again, that I always bring up the triple picking or the palm muting, but they did that really well and mixed it with like some amoebics and some like just faster hardcore shit. They're a cool band. And I don't know why, but I gave this a listen because I'd never heard this one back in the day. I'd heard all their other full lengths and recordings, and I gave this a listen. I was like, oh yeah, it's really good. And I actually don't think I like it as much as Whoops, Sorry Vicar, or Your Turn Next. It's good, and it actually sounds like it's also the most like cohesive and together of theirs, but it's also missing something. I'm not sure what that is. But then again, how many times have I listened to this? Twice? I should spend some more time with it. I should spend some more time with everything that I own. This is a CD compiling English Dogs, To the End of the Earth, and Forward into the Battle. Forward into the Battle. Let's try that again. This is compiling English Dogs, To the Ends of the Earth, and Forward into Battle on one CD. This came out on Step 1, which is normally a lot more like kind of oi and street punk stuff. If you don't know English Dogs, they were an early-ish example of like UK crossover, which is kind of a different beast entirely than US crossover. Metal punk might be more of an appropriate name. I've heard both kind of tossed around with Reckless Abandon, but they're also, they can be included in the same conversation as Broken Bones and a few others. Great stuff. Definitely Forward into Battle a very good chunk of that record is some of my favorite music of this style. And I always heard really good stuff about To the Ends of the Earth, and I'd never really owned it. I've had Forward into Battle for ages on vinyl. Before that, I had it on tape. I never had the EP, and it's even better. Super, super good. Just gallopy, kind of, sounds like Venom, but a little bit more together with more like snarly, kind of almost exploited or GBH street punk woven in. They went almost full on thrash metal after this, and that stuff's pretty good too. But these two are great. I'm very stoked to have them on one CD. How are we doing on time here? 22 minutes. All right. Also from the UK, the very cracked case, Solstice, Halcyon. I'm saying that right? Right? Okay. Yeah, people talk about Epic Doom a fair amount. And of course, Solitude Aeternus comes up, Candlemass. Even, I don't know, even some like South American bands like Capilla Ardente I hear get brought up a lot, but I know people love Solstice. I just never hear them mentioned like in any circles that I kind of roll in that much on social media or otherwise. And it's a damn shame because they're fucking awesome. They've been around forever. They're from the UK. They had a couple of members of Extreme Noise Terror at one point. I'm not sure if they still do. But as far as like melancholic heaviness, soaring vocal melodies, I feel like they fucking nail it. And this is just a EP, but it's got a ton of bonus tracks on it, making it like longer than a full length. So, I mean, if you like any kind of, if you like Crypt Sermon, as far as like new stuff goes, Solitude Aeternus, and you don't know Solstice, definitely check out some Solstice if you can get your hands on it. It's kind of scarce. I feel like a lot of their stuff isn't readily available, which is a shame. This was definitely something I had to check off on my list of stuff to own. Mortuary Drape, Italian black metal. I want to just call it black metal. I hear a lot of people refer to it as that like classic Italian doom. Has that certain theatric kind of quality that a lot of Italian metal, especially like the stuff that leans more into a doomy territory, does. This is cool. I mean, I expected it actually to be kind of slower. I've listened to them at certain times. I actually didn't give them a chance for quite a while. I blame Finn McKenty, the punk rock MBA, because he used to do a blog called Metal Inquisition, and it did a lot of goofing on bands and stuff like that. And believe it, I know that guy has his detractors or whatever, especially after that black metal video he made. But he really does know his shit with metal a lot. And the first time I ever heard of Mortuary Drape was sometime in the mid to late 2000s when that blog was around, and he was poking fun at like the way they dressed on stage and stuff like that. There's a lot of goofing on bands in that blog. It was very, very funny. Yeah, I mean, these guys are a huge influence and massively important. I can see where I think Abysmal Grief came a little bit later. Correct me in the comments if I'm wrong. And I can certainly see the influence. I can see these guys kind of holding up the legacy of Death SS and all those as well. So good shit. Yeah, it has a lot of that kind of atmosphere that before black metal, that pre-black metal being a solidified genre, a lot of it being a certain vibe, it holds that really well, like certain bands from Greece and Switzerland did, before the sort of Norwegian thing took over. But this compiles a couple of recordings, All the Witches Dance and Into the Drape, which are their two earliest, I think. Then I have a little gift from Benjamin J. Smasher, Omen's Warning of Danger, which I think he got a nicer version of this or something. It's a digipack on Metal Blade. Yeah, I mean, great U.S. power metal. These guys, I feel like, get talked up a lot with my friends for good reason. There's really something to be said for this, that like it's so hard to nail a sound like this nowadays. I hear so many bands trying to capture this like fierce, raw yet melodic heavy metal that's like fast and aggressive and not bleeding over into like thrash metal territory, not being goofy, because some of the stuff is very of its time, and capturing that spirit's really tough. the guy's vocals, J.D. Kimball there, do have a certain kind of like husk and a certain kind of like almost like throaty bluesy feel, but also retain that very like gauntleted sort of metal thing. And yeah, it fucking rules. Then we got Guided Cradle. This is a crust stench band from the Czech Republic. They're from Prague, and then it looks like they moved to Portland at some point. And, you know, I saw this. These guys look like some fun dudes to party with, too. Yeah, this is great fucking modern crust, but holding a lot of influences from the bands that came before, especially like that OG wave of like the stench bands, like Hellbastard, you know, Deviated Instinct, all those. Prophecy of Doom, you know, it has that heaviness, but it also, there's not a lot of it, but a little bit of that modern sort of like almost like arena crust on a few songs. Like there's a little bit of that kind of, you know, super soaring melodies that Tragedy and From Ashes Rise have, like slightly here and there. They're not afraid to like, you know, kick the D-beat rhythms as well. It's yeah, it's really fucking good. This is a lot of stuff that I slept on at the time because I just was not interested in anything with like kind of growly, crusty vocals for a certain period in the 2000s, so I kind of missed out on Hellshock and these guys and some others, which is too bad. I was, however, super into Coke Bust. This Grave Mistake had a sale. These guys are wonderful people, wonderful band, straight edge band from the DC area. Chris, their drummer, I don't know if he still is, but he's the live drummer for Repulsion. Hell of a drummer, fucking sweetheart of a man. And this band was incredibly fast. Certainly for people, if you like early DRI, Siege, Infest, you know, blasting fast hardcore with very little, if any, kind of metal influence. Yeah, pretty big disparity between blasting and mosh, like pretty fucking heavy, very, very well recorded, super adept musicianship. These guys were great, and they always like brought the house down live. Really, really good shit. Little memory lane here, going further back into the 90s. We got the Pist, input equals output. I know these get thrown in a lot with orders from Havoc. I believe that's where I got mine. I ordered some stuff from Felix Havoc a couple of times, and it's a nice CD to have because I didn't have it. I love Ideas Are Bulletproof. They're full length from when that come out, 95 or 96, I want to say. This is a compilation of, this band was from Connecticut, of all their singles and 7 inches and all that stuff. They were super political, super left-leaning, very vocally anti-racist, very vocally anti-hunting, anti-cop. The whole thing was being anti a bunch of stuff, and they were pretty mad, you know. Lots of lyrics, but somehow Bill, the singer, never really made it feel like too verbose or too wordy. Just pissed, angry stuff, like literally pissed. And not like a narco punk either, you know. A lot of the stuff that's like heavily message laden with a lot of the shit is like of that kind of whatever crass or conflict kind of leaning area. This sounded like Negative Approach. They even covered Negative Approach and almost kind of like Oi. Definitely in the vein of like what Fucked Up would do a little bit later. Real stompy angry shit. Then we got one of the releases this year from Caligula that I liked quite a bit. Most of the stuff I get from Caligula I liked quite a bit. This is Dunwich, Tail Tide Hearts. It's a full length on CD, something that Ignacio doesn't do too often. And I'm glad he did, because this is definitely a full album that you can enjoy for the duration of its play length. It's certainly got a lot of black metal elements. I would be remiss to call it straight up black metal. The vocals are super like angelic and haunting, and then, you know, go into more of a traditional black metal thing. And the vocal kind of cadence and patterns don't seem typical for black metal either. It almost sounds like a melody you'd find on like a Chris Isaak record, like on the first couple of tracks. It's hard to explain, but it's certainly like it's pretty transcendent. You know, I think it would appeal to a lot of different fans of a couple of different genres. It really hits when I'm in the mood for something like that, something that kind of deep and that requires, you know, a good headphones listen. Then I got Raw Power, Wop Hour. One of the biggest names in Italian hardcore, flagship band. This is when they went a little bit more almost like speed metal. Got really, really, really tight on this one. This was originally an EP that was only a couple of songs, and then they added some live stuff. But this was later on in the 80s. I think it was after their second album, After Your Brain. And man, they really tightened it up with the double bass and just everything being airtight, hyper fast, and not really getting wanky or anything. Like, still sounded like a hardcore band, but just had a little bit more of the technicality of thrash metal, just a touch, you know. They didn't go super goofy or anything like that. Then we got this lovely compilation, Stockholm's Mongo. This, a lot like, there's a couple of comps that, like the I Thrash Therefore I Am comp and some others that I can't think of at the moment, that started out as like just kind of DIY tape comps and gained such notoriety that they were properly reissued as a CD or vinyl. This is what the original tape looks like. So what this compilation is all Swedish bands, all incredibly raw, bombastic, very heavily Discharge influence, but also I feel like kind of forward thinking in terms of the extremity, almost bordering on in like a proto grind kind of thing. Mob 47's on it, who were great. They were a little bit more influenced by international hardcore and like some US stuff. You know, there's almost something getting close to like a breakdown. I think it's on Racist Regime. Protest Banked is like, it's a side project of members of, I'm trying to remember who. I think the Filthy Christians and Moderate Liquidation. I'll have to check that. But that stuff's like almost like not quite Fear of God, but getting close to like some kind of real blown out, almost proto grind kind of shit. Agony with an I, also great noisy Swedish hardcore that went on to be a pretty good thrash metal band after changing the I to a Y. And then we got 86 Mentality, another cheap buy from Grave Mistake. DC band, kind of sounded like if Iron Cross maybe weren't as drunk, could play their instruments a little bit better, play them on time together a little bit better. But yeah, angry bald boy, fucking HC right there, Negative Effects, Negative Approach, all that kind of shit. You know, maybe a little bit of early Meatmen even. You know, definitely Foreskins are in there. This is one of my favorite bands from the 2000s for sure. Just fucking ripping pissed off shit. Then I got a bunch of Driller Killer stuff, like almost their whole discography for I think $30 on CD. There's only one I didn't get. This is their earliest, their first two on one CD, Total Fucking Brutalized. They got Brutalized and Total Fucking Hate, plus a bonus video, so you can get an idea when that came out. Get your quick time Driller Killer video. Yeah, these guys were fucking Swedish hardcore that leaned very metal. It gets really incestuous with the members. I know that the guys from Black Uniforms, somebody from Anti-C-Max, possibly one of those dudes was also in Wolfpack. I don't know. All these guys, it's a small scene, so they all kind of played together. They all played this really heavy, kind of European hardcore. It was very like neck breaking and fast. Was pretty D-beatish, but also had like a lot of like Motorhead and almost kind of like early thrash, and maybe you'd even say like some Celtic Frost kind of influences in it as they went on. The first two are keep that influences kind of at a minimum. You know, it's still like just kind of thrashy punk stuff, but as they go on, they get a lot more brutal. They even get some like kind of groove elements, which is weird because they're not terrible. They don't make it suck. I think it's because the groove elements only last for like a split second. Then you got Skit Kids, also Swedish. These guys kind of kept that Swedish hardcore tradition going. You know, sort of metallic. Definitely listen to their fair share of Discharge and the Verukers, as well as, you know, fellow countrymen that use that drum beat. But these guys were really, really good with the rock and roll vibes. Almost like a Swedish hardcore answer to Annihilation Time, who were big in the US at the time. Just like a lot of like great fucking dueling guitar solos and just face melting riffs and lots of just bombastic kind of ripping, just fun time rock and roll like Motorhead. You know, Turbo Negro was huge at the time, so there's probably some influence there, at least in spirit. Also political, you know, like any good hardcore punk band would be. But yeah, this compiles like 3 records, EPs it looks like. I have everything by them. You can't go wrong with any of their records, and they're one of those bands that were huge when they were around, and I don't know if people talk about them that much, but I bet you can get their shit for dirt cheap. This came out on Putrid Filth Conspiracy. Then we got my buddy Kevin's band here. Oh, before I get into that, here's the other driller killer, Reality Bites. That is ugly on so many fucking levels. This came out a little bit later in the discography. This is when they got kind of heavy and more groove laden. I'm just gonna... That was supposed to be in the same pile as the other one, but whatever. What do you gotta do? Who cares? Suburban Resistance. Kevin, who lives in Las Vegas, who is from Rochester, New York. This is his new band. He always, even in his last band too, he always kind of reminded me a little bit of the singer from the Dickies. This is a lot more of a lighter fare of punk, but not, you know, definitely not like shiny fucking pop punk kind of shit. It's good like rock and roll, you know, kind of attitude laden, played by experienced members. He told me the drummer was in the Faction with Steve Caballero. I did see the cover and I was like, okay, maybe it'll sound like Wolf Pack or Wolf Brigade because it's got skulls and wings, but no, it is a pleasant surprise actually, because I have plenty of stuff that sounds like that right now, and this is like good rock and roll, like toe tapping, kind of snotty sort of punk rock shit. Fucking great. More Japanese stuff. Kuro and the Cums. Kuro is like a pretty early Japanese hardcore punk band. Super noisy and falling apart and fucked up sounding. Odd song lengths that I mean, I've heard them also quoted as like a big influence on grind. Definitely doesn't sound really like grind to me. I could see how, like, you know, 1984, like Nick Bullen or whoever was in that Napalm Death lineup, like checking this out at the time and being like, okay, you know, but it's definitely like just super noisy kind of hardcore punk. No doubt, like probably influential on new stuff like Xionos and shit like that, Nightmare. Then you got the Cums, who were way more together and on point, kind of raging kind of shit. You know, people talk about Gauze a lot, and I love me some Gauze, but man, the Cums, it is some nasty, just no frills, just relentless fucking Japanese punk shit. A lot of these stuff is just like me being nostalgic about the 90s. There's all these CDs I could get for like pennies on the dollar. I'm like, oh yeah, I haven't had that in forever. From where I just came from, Asshole Parade with Student Ghetto Violence, Gainesville, Florida, more or less power violence. The beginning of, you know, that kind of sound spreading out of California, ending up in other locales. There's a bunch of examples that Black Army Jacket, CR, you know, in New York, Suppression in Virginia, etc. Asshole Parade was always one of my favorites, though, that played this style regardless of geographic location, even with the California bands, just because they were so explosive and so pissed. They combined like occasional death growls, not very often, with like almost like a Youth of Today, like kind of squawking like Ray of Today sort of hardcore vocal a lot of the time. Really funny samples. The opening sample is what was his name in Dazed Confused? Clint, the greaser kicking the shit out of the other guy for mentioning that he was smoking pot or whatever. There was kind of making fun of the Warzone skit from the first Warzone record, like, I can't take it no more, I got a bug in my mouth, which was always a big in-joke with me and my friends. But yeah, I mean, if you like power violence stuff, like grindy kind of hardcore shit, this is definitely up your alley. I highly recommend it. It is, I'm sure, very cheap. This came out on No Idea Records back in the day. This band got back together, and I wanted to check out their reunion stuff, see if it was any good. I haven't gotten around to that yet. And we got Submachine, Pittsburgh band, punk band. I think they started as early as like the late 80s. I could be wrong. They were around for the bulk of the 90s. Most of their stuff was really good. Kind of like alcohol sodden, closing down the bar. Everybody in the band's over 6 feet tall, like imposing drinkers punk rock. It was funny because these guys were around at a certain point in the 90s where like punk had been dead for so long and Rancid hadn't gotten big yet. The whole Rancid Green Day thing hadn't happened, and there was at least like one or two bands in each town or in each area or whatever, keeping the faith, keeping the spark alive. Like there was a Alienation from Binghamton, there was Toxic Narcotic in Boston, these guys in Pittsburgh, Filth in California, the kind of like the drunk punk, like gutter punk kind of bands. And these guys are cool, if you like anti-scene, if you like, they're definitely not part of that like Confederacy of Scum kind of stuff, but it does kind of have a similar kind of like depraved sort of vibes. Politically they were far on the other side of that, but and Poison Idea, I mean, you can't think of stuff like this without thinking of Poison Idea. A little bit of rock and roll, gravelly vocals, kind of fun to knock back 13 or 14 beers to. Then you got Extreme Noise Terror, A Holocaust in Your Head. This is the earlier stuff that got re-recorded later. It's pretty sloppy, like grindcore crust kind of shit. A lot less grind than I remember it being, these earlier recordings. It definitely got tightened up for this one. Holocaust in Your Head, this and the split with Chaos UK, it's definitely more along the lines of like a looser kind of crust sort of thing. Dual vocal, fucking great shit. If you like early Napalm Death and you haven't listened to Extreme Noise Terror yet, what are you waiting for? Born Dead Icons, Ruins. So this is a cool one. I do not like it as much as the record Work, which I believe came after this, but Born Dead Icons, Quebecois band, involved a lot of like kind of rock and roll, gloomy, almost in its own way, like kind of atmospheric, mid-pace sort of stuff. The Lazy Man's MRR description was always like Motorhead meets Amoebics, which is always confusing because Amoebics often sounded like Motorhead, so I don't know how you want to do that equation, what the pie graph is for the amount of Motorhead in this, but it's fucking great. And then Pressure Pact, Negative Point of View, European band. Great, just more of that great ignorant hardcore that I love so much, the early 80s style type of shit. All the Boston, Detroit, all the bands with negative in the name. Just the short songs, angry shit, super good. Napalm Death, Throes of Joy in the Jaws of Defeatism. The new one, I listen to it all the time. I have it on vinyl too. It's awesome. It's one of the best of the year for sure for me. I don't have a very long list of best of 2020, but this is definitely on it, near the top. They're still doing their thing. They're still Napalm. They're still doing super tight blast beats, socially conscious kind of lyrics. Big nod to Discharge, it seems like, by the way, speaking of Discharge there. I like how Barney can't do the vocals he used to do, and he's kind of evolved his voice into something else. I always respect vocalists that go hard in the paint, you know, and are able to continue and have to get creative and do something cool with it. I think Bob from Drop Dead is in a similar boat, but the music, they experiment a lot more with just kind of weird, icy, kind of like anti-melodies, and it's got like a lot of like weird post-punk like Killing Joke, and they've always been fans of Killing Joke and the Swans, and you can hear it on different recordings, but they really keep it interesting on this. You know, they keep up the speed, but they get the sort of odd, weird, throwing weird angles at you kind of thing that they've done a lot to a large degree in the past, but I feel like they perfected Napalm Death weirdness on this. Put it that way. Black Uniform, Straight Edge My Ass. More Swedish stuff. Swedish metal punk. Man, this stuff rules. I mean, this kind of like almost bridges the gap between all the Swedish stuff that I've been talking about, like the noisy shit and like the stuff that's a little bit more like, you know, rock and roll and D-beat, and kind of bridging the gap between this and stuff like Broken Bones and English Dogs. This absolutely rips. It's a compilation of a bunch of demos, and one of them that's from a little bit later on, recordings from like 1990, almost gets into like Slaughter Strapato territory as far as like heaviness and almost sounding like some kind of death metal. Very fucking cool shit. I'm so glad this got reissued. Their stuff was really, really hard to find for forever. I ordered it from Singapore. Hopefully it has some US distribution by now. Pioneering work, discography, Inferno. 56 tracks of remastered classics, 83 to 92, from Germany's hardcore punk pioneers. I knew of these guys because SOD covered one of their songs on what ended up on a compilation. I think it's on all the reissues of Speak English or Die. They covered a German band. This is great shit. You know, there's something about all the 80s, early 80s hardcore bands, as well as metal bands, you know, that had their own regional influences, their own sound, in their own little vacuum. And Inferno is weird because lots of really fast songs. There's a certain like weird sing-along-y quality, despite the fact that it's like face-rippingly fast type of shit. And then like randomly there's a song on here that's track 9, Leibesled, this 4-minute and 15-second song that's like almost a post-punk song just kind of thrown in there. It's cool. I'm really into it. I have not given the second disc with the second album as much of a chance, but and I'm gonna completely murder the pronunciation, but Tad Un Wassen, the debut, I've had forever. A while ago there was bootlegs circulating of it, of which I still have. Great German hardcore there. Caligula, Technical Aggression. East Coast New York thrash metal from the 80s that I had not heard of. This demo only, then some live songs from CBGBs. Nothing too stand out about it, but if you like thrash metal, particularly like East Coast thrash, you know, if you're into Whiplash and stuff like that, early Overkill, Nuclear Assault, you know, this was a band that never quite got their shot, you know, what could have been kind of band from New York City. Not really crossing over with hardcore much at all, at least not more than like your average thrash metal band from anywhere else. So you know, and there's some flyers in here from like CBGB shows. There's them playing with Whiplash and Sheer Terror, and the New York Hoods. Rest in Pieces, Crackdown at Streets in New Rochelle, which is, I think there's a lot of shows that Immolation played there, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, certainly not like required or anything, but if you want to check out some 80s thrash you haven't heard before, pick it up. I don't know what this came out on. Ripping Storm Records. Just a couple more. Right. Nagata. This is another gift from Ben. Smasher. For a while I was like, I can't even figure out what the fuck is going on. This is way over my head. Some weird meditative fucking black metal stuff. And then I gave it a good listen when I was getting on my flight to go down to Florida the first time. I flew back and forth a couple of times there, and it was so fucking soothing. Mostly instrumental, and from what I picked up, but very like sort of ambient and soothing. But there's no like dungeon synth or anything like that. Like it's just really long, kind of melodic, pondering sort of black metal compositions, and it's quite good. All right, well that's it finally. Yeah, I'm not going to take up any more of your time. Have a good day, evening, afternoon, morning, whatever you're having. I'm out of here. Where's the button to stop it?